Welcome to the Bauble Podcast, episode 99. I'm your host, Basa J. Witta, and with me is my co-host, Yuki Lee Bender. Today we're going to be doing our Hunted pre-release primer, and it's going to include everything you need to know about Hunted going into the pre-release. But before we do that, how was your week, Yuki? You went to Prague for the world premiere. How was that, Yuki?
It was really good. I got in on the Tuesday, hung out with some friends who were coming from Europe and Netherlands, from Germany and the Netherlands and Europe. And then we were kind of just like hanging out, just checking out the city, having some food. It was pretty nice. I like Prague. It's a very pretty city. The food was pretty good as well and very affordable for Europe. I think it was like roughly comparable to our food in Canada in terms of price, maybe slightly better bang for your buck, a little cheaper, a little bit better quality for that price point, which was pretty nice and like a pleasant surprise. And I had a good time in Prague. The world premiere was the main focus though, and that was a ton of fun. I actually just got back yesterday from it. So in the world premiere, I just kind of tried to play all of the heroes and try everything out. And by the time we got to Sealed and in the calling in day 2, I was feeling pretty prepared. I ended up playing Sindra in Sealed and going 6-2 on Sindra. I think probably both of my losses were my fault, which is interesting. There's a lot of small, we'll talk about it. There's a lot of small optimizations and micro decisions in this format. I think it is maybe the hardest limited format I've played in Flesh and Blood. At least like in terms of like baseline mechanics, like Bright Lights was complicated in terms of like knowing what to do. This has more like moving parts, it feels like Arachne just has a bunch of different hero effects that keep changing, and the game, like how you have to play, changes based on what their hero does, which is dynamic. And like the weapon just like sometimes it attacks for 1, sometimes it attacks for 2, they can destroy it. The equipments, like many of them have a built-in mini game where you can get 1 point of value as a baseline, but if you use it at the correct time, you can get 2 points of value, and just like all this kind of stuff really adds up. And this, between this and having a bunch of new cards that we hadn't seen before the world premiere, it was just like actually really challenging. And I talked to quite a few other very strong players, and they were all saying that they were making some mistakes as well. So I do think this set's pretty hard, and I kind of like that, honestly. Like it feels good losing and being like, oh, like I might have actually been able to get this if I like made 1 or 2 decisions different. So actually pretty impressed with the sealed format overall. Going into draft in day 2, I drafted Arachne. I went 3-0 in my first pod, so I was live for top 8 at this point, and then I drafted Arachne again. I thought my second draft deck was actually even better, but I lost to my friend and teammate Jimmy Nguyen, who ended up making top 8, so congrats to Jimmy. Unfortunately, I got knocked out. I did go on to 2-1 that pod and ended up 13th, I believe. So I top 16 to the calling, which, feels pretty good overall, honestly. I'm very happy with how I played and especially how I drafted. This calling was huge. I think it was like 950 players, so can't be upset with a top 16.
Okay, yeah, that's a lot of players. It's like almost 1,000 players for the calling. That's crazy.
Yeah. There was like definitely a lot of very strong players, like the tournament grinders from all over Europe there, and also just like a lot of new players. I talked to a lot of people, especially in the world premiere, but also some of the early calling rounds where they're like, I started the game like 2 months ago. I'm like, that's awesome. So yeah, very cool.
Yeah, even the pre-release here, at least at our local game store, like Magic Stronghold, I almost didn't get a seat until yesterday, which was my fault for not pre-regging, but it was fully sold out, and one guy had to drop out, so I got to take his ticket, so I get to at least play a pre-release this season.
Yeah, the set seems popular, which is cool, and I think that it is actually a very fun set. So yeah, I hope people are excited for pre-release. I think that this might be my favorite sealed format. I wasn't sure that I liked it initially, and after having played more of it and gotten more experience in the format, I think this might be the best sealed format that we've had. I'm curious to see how things will go at pre-release. I'm going to try more of the heroes out in sealed, hopefully, and get a little bit better feel for that. But I think I like this sealed format quite a bit. So
Okay, that's good to hear. That's good to hear. What was the most popular deck at like either the calling or the world premiere, like in terms of like hero popularity?
definitely Fang. Fang was sort of the talk of the town, especially at the start of the world premiere. There was a lot of people going, Fang is broken. And initially, I thought that Fang was too good, and this was maybe some of my criticism of the format early on. As we played more and more, I started to feel like that was less and less true. I think that Fang is really good. He's sort of easy to play, very efficient, and he's very mathy. Like his cartridge is obviously powerful. He has a bunch of 0 for 4s, like some of them block for 3. Like it's just easy to understand what Fang is doing and why he's good. But I actually think that there's room for Sindra and Arachne to succeed. I believe that there was somebody that 8-0'd on each of the heroes. Like I believe there was 3 players that 8-0'd, and each of them were on a different hero for sealed in the calling. And I did see a lot of Fang at the top tables, and then Sindra, and then Arachne in terms of popularity of like decks that were doing well, and Fang by far the most. But I think some of it is that just like Sindra and Arachne are honestly just a little harder to play. Arachne in particular, I think, has a pretty big learning curve and is easy to look at and go, oh, these cards are like a little below rate. Like you have a lot of like 2-card 5s, 3-card 9s, which don't sound great when you're like Fang can play 0 for 4s, but there's lots of like small ways that Arachne makes up that value. A lot of it from his hero tech, from their hero techs, giving +1 against mark targets, for example, can really, really add up, especially because that's like not even necessarily a once per turn effect. So sometimes Arachne's hero ability will give you like +2, +3 over the turn, which is really, really powerful, actually. So I think all the heroes are pretty good, and one of my friends, Ian Zhang, actually, after having played the calling, I believe he played Sindra at the calling and made day 2 on Sindra. Um, after the calling, played a side event sealed and played Arachne and made the comment that like, I think my Arachne deck's really good. I believe he 3-0 split the last round, and then he was saying that like probably some of his other pools actually could have played Arachne, but it was just a matter of like we didn't understand Arachne until probably day 2 of the calling. We kind of figured it out like the night before day 2. So I think some of it might less be that like Arachne isn't good, and more that like people just have to figure out how to play Arachne.
Okay, yeah, I think that makes a lot of sense. I guess before we move on, do you want to just do like a Patreon shout out?
Yeah, so thank you to all of our patrons. We really appreciate what you do. It seems like people are getting excited in the Discord. There's been a lot of questions about sealed, about the set, and also about constructed with the new heroes coming up. So if you're interested in the Patreon Discord, now's a great time to get in. That's available to all of our patrons, and there will be lots of new content coming as we move into the hunted, both for limited as well as for constructed with the new heroes. So thank you to our patrons, and thank you to all of our patrons in particular who came up and said hi to me. There was quite a few people who came up, said hi, mentioned that they liked the podcast, mentioned that they liked reading whatever content, certain deck text that people resonated with, and that was really nice. It's always nice to meet you. So yeah, thanks so much, and hope that we can continue to help you out as we go into the hunted.
Okay, perfect. Where do you want to start with talking about the Hunted pre-release primer?
Yeah, so let's kind of just talk about the overall like format feel and what the format's like, and then we can kind of talk about what each of the heroes individually kind of want, and a very basic idea of like their game plans or how they play.
Yeah, that makes sense. I know you mentioned there was like a lot of 0 for 4s for the Draconic heroes. Do they like come with go again, or is it mostly just like baseline no go again? The wounding blows of the format.
Yeah, so there is actually a lot of 0 for 4 go agains in the set. Like for example, Fang just has cut deep at common, which is a 0 for 4. Your next dagger gets +4, go again, 0 cost, blocks 3. Just clean 0 for 4, block 3. All that it requires is that you swing your dagger afterwards, which is like what you want to be doing anyways. There's like more of these at rare. There's honestly just like a whole bunch of 0 for 4 go agains in the set. Maybe less so for Arachne, but for Fang and Sindra, there's a ton of them, and Arachne does get like a little bit of access to this, mostly in like the rare slot, I guess. Like up sticks and run is 0 for 4 for your next dagger attack, and you can pay 1 to retrieve a dagger, which is equip it from your graveyard, or cut through, which is a 0 for 4, 0 for 3, and it gets +1 and go again if you've hit with a dagger. So yeah, pretty much all the classes have 0 for 4s. A lot of them are at rare. even some at common, which is again like super super powerful.
Okay, yeah. Then does that mean like as you, maybe you mentioned this earlier too, but like how real is fatigue in the format? You said Arachne mirrors can go to fatigue, but do you think Sindra or like Fang can even go to fatigue with like these powerful cards?
Yeah, so I think that the draconic matchups, especially in sealed, are a lot more prone to ending quickly and being very aggressive. But I do think that fatigue is possible, and a lot of it has to do with like all the heroes have daggers, which are just like weapons with go again, and their late games get very very scary. So like you can often put your opponents in a spot where they just like are in a blocking pattern and you just strip their whole hand every turn. So because of that, games can go to fatigue, but it is very much a like proactive fatigue where you're kind of like jockeying for position and then you kind of take over the game. Think of like this is sort of like Katsu, for example, in limited, where you just start going like Kodachi into an attack and they just like have to block and maybe you can't actually kill them, but you kind of lock them out of the game. I think all of the heroes in this set can do this. Basically, like Fang can do this by like threatening a reaction and 2 dagger swings every turn. Arachne can do this because once they're marked, you can go like dagger for two into like a blue stealth guard for two, and if they're at two, they just have to block. And Sindra can do this by looping her kunais. So she can basically like if she has no kunais, she can pitch a blue on her opponent's turn, equip the kunais because it's once per turn instant, go to her turn, go dagger dagger, break the chain, pitch another blue, get her daggers back, dagger dagger. So that's like 4 cards, take 7 resources on your turn, 3 on your opponent's turn, but that will swing 4 daggers, and you can just loop that forever. So all of these heroes, like once you get to like 1 or 2 and your opponent has tempo, like the game is kind of effectively over.
Okay, okay, that makes sense. So, would you say like this is a format where you really can't go like what's the number? Like if you're at like 3, do you think you're safe or do you think like at 3 you're kind of like locked out space?
Yeah, it depends on the hero and it depends how many cards you're leaving them with. I would say that like 2 feels like a pretty big number because both Sindra and Arachne have some amount of like the flick effect where you break a dagger, deal 1 direct damage that's unblockable. Their daggers attack, Syndra's daggers attack for 1 a bunch of times. Arachne's daggers attack for 2 generally if they're marked. So I think that 2 is like a pretty key number against those heroes. And then Fang, yeah, once you start getting maybe similar, his reactions start become really threatening. So if he has like a full hand and you're at like 4, you're probably just screwed against Fang because of the ability to like react on the first dagger or the second dagger, and it's very hard to play around. But if he's on down to like a low number of cards, like sometimes you'll like wind up where you're like both trading 2 card hands, and in those scenarios you can probably get by at like again like above 2 is probably fine because yeah, most of his reactions are either like 2s or 3s, so his dagger comes in for like 4 or 5 if he reacts. If you like give a 3 block, you'll leak like 1 or 2 damage kind of a thing if he has 1 reaction.
Okay, okay, that is pretty interesting.
So yeah, I think that like 3 is kind of the key threshold, and then like maybe like 5 after that. Like when you're at 5, you're like relatively safe, but if they have a big hand, you're in a lot of trouble. And then like when you drop below 3, you're like really very at the end game, and your opponent can't really have too much tempo. But I've had a lot of games go like 1-to-1 kind of thing, sometimes for more than 1 turn.
Okay, okay, that's good to know. Then when I was looking at the spoilers, I seen that there's like a lot of attack reactions. You're talking about Fang. Like, what was the main ones you saw, or like the main ones to watch out for?
Yeah, so in Fang, there's like a very clear pattern. There's like a whole bunch of draconic attack reactions. It can feel overwhelming at first, especially like we didn't get to read the spoilers beforehand, so it was just like a lot to take in. But they follow a pretty clear pattern where on the first chain link, so Fang has some cards that care about the second draconic chain link, but in terms of the first draconic chain link, so the first dagger swing usually, he can play usually a 0 for 2 draconic reaction or a 1 for 3 draconic reaction. And keep in mind that his dagger gets +1 when you play a Draconic card on that chain link during the reaction step. So this can get bumped up to like, so like the 0 for 2 will bump the dagger up to 4, and the 1 for 3 will bump the dagger up to 5. And then there's also like generic warrior or assassin warrior cards that are usually 0 for 3s, so that would bump the dagger up to 4. And if you use a fealty, you could bump it up to 5. And I think the one exception to this pattern is To the Point, which is a rare, and this is a 0 for 3 on a dagger, but it's a 0 for 4 if you're marked. So yeah, that's sort of like the one exception to this rule. But that's sort of like the general pattern for Fang. Once you get to the second chain link, a lot of these effects you can add like +1 on the Draconic reacts. Like you might have like a 0 for 2 that's a 0 for 3 on the second chain link, or a 1 for 3 that's a 1 for 4 on the second chain link. And there's some things that can only be played on the second chain link. So the second chain link has a little bit higher ceiling, but the first chain link is very, very predictable.
Okay, that's good to know. I noticed that there's a card called Razor Reflex in the set. Only comes in at red in this set. This also pumps daggers too, right?
Yep, it's daggers or 1-cost attacks. And notably, this is the only react that Sindra can play. Outside of her gloves, I guess. She gets the gloves that flick a dagger, and there's a majestic dagger throw reaction as well. It's like throw a dagger, draw a card if it hits. But outside of those cards, the only react that Sindra can play is Razor Reflex, so you're generally pretty safe from Sindra, and Razor is a rare, so you're not going to see that much of it. And then in Fang, it sort of follows a similar pattern. It's actually maybe even below raid. I don't think Razor Reflex is that fantastic in Fang, because you just like have 0 for 3 warrior reacts, and some of them block 3, or have some other upside. So yeah, Razor not fantastic in Fang, and then pretty decent in Assassin, honestly, because it can give a stealth card go again. But yeah, the 1 for 3 stat line is in line with some of Arachne. So Arachne has some 1 for 3 stealth or dagger reacts. I'm trying to remember, it's, what are the cards called? Something about the twin blades, 2 blades, 2 sides of the blade. This is a 1 for 3 reaction that you can play to a dagger, or you can play it to a stealth card. And if you play it to a stealth card, it has when this hits a hero, mark them. So that only comes in red, but is very, very good. And then there's also one at rare called Stains of the Redback, which is a 1 for 3. This one doesn't hit a dagger, actually. This is 1 for 3. Target attack with stealth gets +3 and go again. And it costs 1 less to play if your opponent's marked. So it can be a 0 for 3 if they're marked. And those are kind of like the notable Arachne reacts, I guess. I suppose Stains can target your dagger if you have the Graphen Chelicera token equipped, because that dagger has stealth, but your base weapon it cannot target. So
okay. Is how often did you see the graphene equipped? That's another question. Is like how relevant was that mechanic?
Pretty relevant. I think it's really strong. I think it's actually something that Arachne actively wants in their pool, is like 1 to 2 ways to equip it if possible. It only appears on 2 cards at rare, I believe. The Whittle from the Bone, which is a stealth attack. When this attacks a marked hero, equip it. And Orb Weaver Spinneret, which is a 0 cost, 3 block, equip a Graphen Chelicera, and your next attack with stealth this turn gets +3, go again. So it's sort of like a block 3 nimbleism for stealth cards that also equips the dagger, and the dagger has stealth, so at the baseline you can swing the dagger for 4. I think it's pretty important in Arachne because you end up wanting to break your dagger to mark them, and getting to an end game where you can swing a dagger for 2 or a dagger for 1 resource is really good, especially once they're marked and they're at that like 2 life threshold that we were talking about. Even though Graphen Chelicera only comes in for 1, if you are Arachne Marionette, you have the static, your attacks with stealth that are attacking a marked hero get +1, and if this hits, they get go again, and that applies to the dagger too, because the Graphen token has stealth. So as long as you're the Marionette side, you'll be attacking for 2 with the Graphen Chelicera, and it has go again, because that's the text of Graphen Chelicera. It has go again if they're marked. And when your opponent has to block it, it's really powerful.
Yeah, that does sound really powerful.
So I think that's something you like actively want. I guess you can also get it from, I think it's number 3, Arachne Orb Weaver. It has an ability to discard a card, equip a equip a dagger, and then you get the next stealth attack gets +3, and your graphenes cost 1 less to activate for that turn. So every Arachne can get this token, but I think ideally you have actual cards that do it, because you might go a whole game and never roll a 3.
Okay, yeah, that makes sense. That makes sense. I guess how good are the defensive tools in this format? Are I've seen that there are some defense reactions, or how important are defense reactions in this format?
Yeah, so the defensive tools are very, very good. There's a high 3 block density in general. The equipment is really strong. Basically, it's all like iron rot with upside, and there's a lot of equipment. Like some packs have like one to like about maybe 1.5 equipment on average. So there's just like a ton of equipment in the packs, and you really want a full set of equipment. It feels like the set is very much balanced around having a full set of equipment because the damage is pretty high. So that equipment is really, really important, and many of the equipment can be worth too. Like, I guess I can go into it. The equipment with guard well is like probably your best equipment. It blocks for 1, and then if it blocks a weapon, it gets +1, and it has guard well. So you can either block a weapon for 2, or you can block an attack for 1 and then block a weapon for 1 later in the game. So these are just always worth 2 for free, which is really good, and they're generic, so they go in everybody. There's the Red Alert set, which is the Assassin Warrior set, and this is Blade Break 1. And if an attack reaction has been played or activated this chain link, it gets +1 defense. So if you, like, especially against Fang, if you put it on the first dagger, you'll often be able to get 2 block out of this, which is really, really powerful. And then we have the Leapfrog set. This is probably important to talk about. The Leapfrog set is Blade Break 1, and it says when an opponent plays or activates an attack reaction, you may add this to the active chain link as a defending card. These equipment have kind of 2 ways to function. One way is you can use this as like a pseudo D-react that you have on board to cover up. So, like you block 3 on Fang's dagger. If he reacts to like 4 or 5, you have like 1 or 2 of these pieces to cover it up. That's sort of like the level 1 way to use this. The other way that you can use these is notably, they can jump from chain link to chain link. So if you block one of these on Fang's dagger, he reacts, and then he swings a second dagger and reacts again without closing the chain. You can actually move it to the second chain link when he activates another one, because it doesn't get destroyed until the chain link's closed. And Fang does have some stuff that cares about second draconic chain link, so it's not always free for him to just close the chain. So sometimes he can, sometimes he can't. It sort of depends on the texture of his hand, but there is, like, again, this kind of mini game to get 2 block out of your Leapfrog vocal sack or whatever. That's the headpiece, but one of your Leapfrog equipments.
Wow. Okay, that's kind of cool. So this is an equipment that can block, like, as long as it's in the same combat chain, they can just like block all the combat chains as long as they react every step.
Yep. Yeah, if they keep reacting. So look for spots where you think that they can't close the chain and have to react. This is probably most relevant against Fang. And generally, I think if you're hoping to get this, like, moving it to another chain link, you're probably best using like only one of them, because if you start giving them like 2 or 3 of these, it's like, yeah, I get +1 for having the second draconic chain link, but like you get 3 blocks, so I just close the chain. Whereas if you like use one of them, it's like you kind of put them in a spot where it's like, well, either I get the 1 block, or you get your and you get your +1, or you close the chain and you lose your +1, and then it kind of like you got the 2 block either way. But again, you don't know what's in their hand, so it's like not always going to work, but one of those kind of like small decision points if you're trying to get kind of like every percentage out of your equipment.
Okay, yeah, that's fair. That's actually kind of good to know that the leapfrog is like only good against Fang, right? Because you said Sindra doesn't really have that many attack reactions.
Yeah, I think it's pretty strong in general. Like it's still iron rot at its baseline. Sometimes you can get them in a spot where they like can't close the chain and they want to use their danger digits, which is the a glove equipment that flicks. So sometimes you can get Sindra on that, but yeah, less useful against Sindra, and then very good against Arachne, because Arachne has a lot of reactions for their what do you call it? all their like marked cards and stuff, and they have a bunch of on hits. So against Arachne, being able to cover the on hits at reaction speed is very good. You're unlikely to get the multiple blocks out of it, but the reaction speed block is really really powerful. I think the leapfrog set is maybe better than it reads.
Okay, yeah, that sounds good. Because honestly, on the when you read it the first time, it just looks like an iron rod that like can sometimes block out reaction speed. But yeah, you are right. If it can leap through the chain links, then the card seems insane.
Yeah, the other thing that's very powerful about it is like a lot of the reacts are for +3, and if you have 3 of these, you can just sort of like be in spots where you're like, okay, I block like 4 on your 4, and then they're like, do you want to give it +3? And I can just like I like have a 3 block reaction like on board ready to go. Like it's pretty strong.
Okay, yeah, so they're good in multiples then.
Yeah, they're really good in multiples. You'll play what you have, but they are very, very good in multiples. I think like having 3 in particular is really strong. So maybe something to consider if you have like 3 leapfrog and another piece of equipment, maybe try to keep the 3 leapfrog intact and block with the other equipment first. But yeah, so that's the equipment. And then the other thing to talk about with the defensive tools is the defense reactions. There are quite a few defense reactions. I think they're all effectively hybrid cards that can be played in multiple spots. So the first one I'll talk about that I think is probably the best one is Lair of the Spider. This is Assassin Ninja, and when this when this defends an attack with Go Again, mark the attacking hero, and it blocks for 3. Mark is a pretty important mechanic. It's usually if you can, like in Arachne, it's literally worth +1 because Marionette gives you 1, and then in Sindra, you can often make it worth like a resource or maybe more because some cards get a bonus from being draconic. So this is often just a clean 0 for 4, and in general, like you can think of marking worth at least 1. 1 to 2 is usually what mark's worth. So Lair of the Spider is really good, and every hero in the set has attacks with Go Again. So this is just always online. So this react's really powerful. There's an Assassin Warrior one that has the condition if the attack has higher attack than its base, then you can mark. This one's a little more situational. It's really good against Arachne and Fang. You absolutely can trigger it against Sindra. She has quite a few attacks that get plus power, but it's like less free. But yeah, the 0 for 3 block with conditional mark is still really good. And then there's a draconic reaction that gives, if it defends a red card, you mark them, and it's also a 0 for 3. And that one doesn't work so much against Fang. He does play some attack action, so sometimes you get the value out of it, but it's a little less universal, but still very good because it's a reaction.
Draconic gets a defense reaction at red? That's crazy.
Yeah, it's called Smokeout.
Oh wow. It says when it defends a red card, mark the attacking hero. That seems like kind of natural to do, doesn't it?
Yeah, I think it might be the worst of the cycle that we talked about, the marking defense reacts, because Fang mostly swings the weapons, so it's hard to trigger there. But defense reactions are good against Fang because he's like all attack reactions, so it's like it's still a card that you want and you play in every matchup. Yeah, the D reacts are just like super super good. I guess there's like an assassin only D react that's like slightly less good, but it's still good and you still probably play it. It's called Hunted or Hunter. This is 0 for 3 and red, and it says when this defends and the attacking hero has played or activated an attack reaction this chain link, they lose a life. So conditional 0 for 4 against Fang and Arachne, maybe less exciting against Sindra. And then there's just a few generic attack reactions as well. There's this is like one of my favorite cards to see in my sealed pool, actually. Like when I'm opening my packs, every time I see this card, I'm just like, oh, this is so good. It's called Put in Context. This is just 0 for 3 block, blue, defense reaction, generic, and it says this can only defend an attack with 3 or less base. But that's like everything in this set, honestly. Like I guess there's like some draconic attack actions that can't be blocked by this, and like Sindra has some stuff that can't be blocked by this, but like you're going to be able to get 3 block out of this card, no problem. And it's a reaction. It works on like all the weapons. It works on all the stealth cards. Put in context is just like when you open it, it's like doesn't matter. It goes in every deck, and it just makes your deck way, way, way better. And you also get to pitch it for the late game when the D reacts are like super, super important, because we talked about like the attack reactions being so powerful when you're low. Well, if you have D reacts to navigate those endgames, suddenly all the math changes and you have so many more options available to you. And being able to pitch this card for free is really strong. Um, this card won me so many games. It is like kind of insane.
That makes a lot of sense. Put in context seems like a card that I love, like a blue card, block threes, and it's a defense reaction and a reaction heavy set. Yeah, that sounds amazing.
Yeah, it's super, super, super good. In my draft game, my opponent actually had like Tarantula Toxin, which is a majestic react that gives a dagger +3 or a stealth card -3 and is like a pretty big bomb in limited. And I saw them pitch it to their second cycle, and then I saw like on my next 1 or 2 turns, I saw put in context. I'm like, get to the bottom of my deck, and then they thought they had me with the Tarantula Toxin, and I'm like, no, I got my put in context that I pitch stacked. It was very sweet.
That's actually really sweet. Oh, I love that kind of play.
The other thing, my sealed pool actually had 2 put in context in it, and it also had a sound the alarm, which is a rare generic. It's a critical strike, so 1 for 5, block 3, and it says when this attacks a hero, they reveal their hand. If an attack reaction card is revealed this way, you may search your deck for a defense reaction card, reveal it, then shuffle and put it on top. And notably, you can get put in context, which I think can be really good at the right timing. In Sindra, I think it's just actually very good because Sindra sort of like wants a blue every single hand, and you can just like fix. You basically just like attack with this. You get information on their hand for sure, which is really good. It's on rate, and then you have the option to just like search up, put in context, and be like, oh, I'm just gonna put a blue on top of my deck to make sure I don't brick next turn, and like shuffle my blues back in because Syndra is like pretty resource hungry. So I think that's actually really powerful and something to look out for. That combo is really good.
Sound the alarm. It didn't really sound or like read like a good card, but you're saying it's pretty playable and good.
I think I would slam that into my sealed pool. I like if I open that card, it's like this is in my deck.
Okay.
I'll figure out what hero I'm gonna play after, but this is in my deck.
Okay. If it's that good, yeah, that sounds great. I guess is it pretty valuable being able to look at your opponent's hand?
Is so valuable. Like okay, like it's just a critical strike, and then you know exactly what your opponent's hand is and what to expect. And this is like a set full of attack reactions, and in some cases on hits. So
Okay.
like that information, even if all you do is get the information, like that's already good enough.
Okay. You know what? That's a pretty convincing argument.
And it's just a critical strike. It blocks 3.
Yeah. Can't be mad about a 3 block.
Yeah, it's just like on rate, blocks 3, gives you full information, and like sometimes you can shuffle an attack react or sorry, a defense reaction to the top of your deck. Like I don't know. It's just very good. Very, very, very good.
Okay.
So yeah. Overall, like I think the big takeaway here is set super high power level. The equipment are pushed, the attacks are pushed, the defensive cards are pushed. Games can go to fatigue, but I think sealed in particular can be very explosive. You can do a lot of damage in sealed. My Sindra sealed deck would like routinely deal 16 to 18 damage on a turn, like somewhere in the game. Like it was not like every turn 16 to 18, but like once per game I would do 16 to 18 damage. And this is just like kind of common, honestly. There's just so many good cards, like 0 for 4s. You know, like one there's like 1 for 4s with up like 1 for 4 go agains with upside that are like not even good cards in the set. Sindra has like 1 for 7s in the set at rare. Arachne is like often on rate with disruption attached. Like the cards are just really, really strong. But luckily the defensive tools are also strong to compensate. And I think draft in particular, if you're finding sealed a little bit fast, draft is a little bit slower compared to that. And I think that the draft format is actually very, very nice. But even the sealed format is still, I think there's some blowout games, but I think that sometimes even after the big turns, the games end up being close, which is surprising.
Then does that mean that this is like a go second every time kind of format?
Yes. You want to go second. I've heard some people speculating that maybe in the Arachne mirrors it can be correct to go first. I haven't made up my mind about that. The rationale is like Arachne has a lot of ways to mark. Many of them are uninteractable, and if you can like mark them and flip right away, That can be pretty strong. You might also be able to sneak some damage through with attack reactions. So I've heard some people talk about the Arachne mirror as a place where you can maybe do that, but I'm not sure. I think that certainly Arachne cares less about first and second. The mirror is like definitely the closest spot, but I think in general, second very good.
Okay, yeah, that checks out. A format with a ninja in it, and you just want to go second. And I guess the how real is it if like Fang gets to go first and like you know can react over some of your blocks, or is that really not a thing because like the reaction only pushes up to like four?
Yeah, if Fang goes first, you pretty much just have to like block 2 cards on the first dagger, block 2 cards on the second dagger, and you will be like down 4 cards in deck, but you're usually not going to leak that much. Sometimes if you block 2 cards on the first dagger, then like he can double react over, and maybe you take like a little bit of damage, but it's usually not all that much.
Okay, so like it's not really like he doesn't really have like attack with one dagger, pump it up to like 10 damage or something like that.
Yeah, so like most of the cards will pump in like multiples of 3. Maybe like the first draconic 1 for 3 will be a +4. So I guess like the worst case scenario is like you block 6, he plays like a 1 for 3, which puts it up to 5, plays a 0 for 3, which puts it up to 8. You're leaking 2. I guess potentially you could leak 5 if they go off of Arsenal, which is like a bit rough, but that's sort of like the ceiling. And if you have a reaction there, you're also just like pretty okay. And there are quite a few D-reacts in the set. So yeah, overall, I think it's pretty okay. And they do go off Arsenal for it. So
You're saying that if they go for it, you have a defense reaction. That means they have no arsenal. They have to pass. You take 0 damage.
you might take like 1 or 2, but like that's like also acceptable.
Yeah, that's very acceptable for no arsenal, and then you got to go second. Yeah, that sounds amazing.
Yeah, yeah. So like yeah, Fang can like sometimes react and hit you, but overall it's like
Yeah, it's not like a real issue in the format.
no, I don't think so.
Okay, and I guess like the reactions itself is like kind of conditional too, right? So like it's not like they can just only play reactions in their deck.
Yeah, Fang can play quite a lot of reactions, but the reality is like you don't want only reactions in your deck.
Yeah, that makes sense. That makes sense. Okay, then let's move on. And what do you want to look for in your sealed pool? Like, what's the first cards you're looking for when you're opening up your packs at pre-release?
Yeah, so you can look for your power cards like you would in any set. Your kind of like really good reds. That's like a good place to start. We'll talk about that. I think that there's so many reds in this set because Draconic is a talent that cares about reds, and I think all of the Draconic cards only come in red. So that just means like the red density is very high. There's also a number of reprints in the set that only come in red, like Ronin Renegade, Lava Vein Loyalty. Even outside of that, we have like Red Razor Reflex, Red Sigil of Solace. At Rare, we have Red Razor Reflex in the Assassin pool, Red Backstab. There's just like a bunch of cards that only come in red, which ends up meaning you just like have a lot of reds to play, and so your reds are a good indication, but you want to look for specific ones, and in particular, you want to look for like the powerful red. So these are your 0 for 4 go agains. In Sindra, you might have like 1 for 5 go agains. Sindra has rares that are 1 for 7s. Those are very good. You have some like classic stat lines like 1 for 5 or 0 for 4 chain enders that block 3 and then have mark on hit at rare. Those are really, really good. So you're kind of looking for like your above rate cards. And a good kind of rule of thumb. I wasn't doing this at my sealed pool, at my sealed like world premiere because I hadn't really like I don't know, it hadn't clicked. But when we were doing the show notes, I was realizing that like basically all the rares that are red are very good and very premium. And I think the only real exception to this are the red warrior stances. That doesn't mean that like there aren't powerful commons. Like you have commons that are 0 for 4 go agains and stuff like that, but yeah, maybe if you like look at the rares that are red, that are like those powerful cards, and maybe some of your commons that are powerful cards, like compare how many you have. That might be a pretty good baseline. Most M's in the set are good to very powerful, depending on the M. So if you have a good M, like building around that is reasonable. To give you an idea, like my Sindra calling deck had two of the 1 for 7s at red, had dragon power, which literally is like a 1 for 4 that gets +3 if it's draconic, and I had Art of the Dragon Fang, is it? It's a 1 for 5 that if it's draconic, you deal them 2 damage. So they're both 1 for 7s.
Yeah, Art of the Dragon Fire.
Fire, yeah.
Yeah.
And then I also had what is this card? It was a majestic. I had Dual Threat, which is a yellow block 3 that says if you've attacked with a weapon this turn, the next attack action card you get gets +3. And if you've attacked with an attack action, your next weapon gets +3. So you're basically what you're trying to do is go like weapon, attack, break the chain, play dual threat, and then weapon, attack again, and then it's a 0 for 6. So yeah, basically my Sindra pool had like the two 1 for 7s and dual threat, which is 0 for 6 go again, and like that was like basically my deck. Like I play just like good cards surrounding that, play good math, then you set up a turn with dual threat or one of the 1 for 7s, and you do those are the like 16, 17 damage turns I was playing. And I think if you see like a couple of these like super powerful cards in your set, we'll kind of talk about them as we go through each hero, what some of the real power cards are. But if you have a few of these, like that can be a reason to play a hero, and that can kind of be like a game plan in and of itself.
Okay, that makes sense. Yeah, I was reading Dual Threat in the spoilers, and this card seems insane. Mostly for Sindra, right? Because Syndra's the one that gets to really play this card for like free almost.
Yeah, you even in Sindra you have to do some work because Syndra's often like playing with one dagger in the graveyard, so you kind of have to set it up. Arachne can maybe do it. It's tough because the daggers generally cost 2, and you're a little bit more confined on go again. And then Fang, it's pretty hard.
Yeah, it looks tough on Fang. It really does look tough on Fang.
Yeah, like you have to give both your like you have to give your weapon go again, and then like you have to have an attack with go again, and there's just like not very many. I guess you could do with like Blaze Headlong and another attack. You just don't have that many attacks in Fang though. It's pretty hard. I think this is like mostly a Syndra card. Maybe you can play it in Arachne.
Okay, yeah, that makes sense. But yeah, 0 for 6 go again is kind of ridiculous.
Yeah. So lots of power cards. Look at your power cards first. Other things to look for in this set beyond your power cards, because you might find like your pool is just super powerful, is look for 3 equipment minimum. I talked about how important and powerful the equipment is in this set. I think that you'll find that most of your sealed pools just have 4 equipment for all heroes. That was my experience. But you want at least 3 equipment. If you're playing less than 3 equipment, like it's pretty bad. You're giving up a lot. So you want minimum 3 equipment. You want blue 3 block density. I think blue 3 blocks are really premium, which sort of makes sense if there's above average reds in the set. Blue 3 blocks are like the more rare things, and I think that basically like all the decks want 9 to 10 blues, so having a higher density of blue 3 blocks is like actively a pretty good thing, and is kind of a reasonable way to decide your sealed deck. You still need like a coherent red base and cards that are reasonable, but like you likely have them. So blues is a good tiebreaker. Some Fang decks can run as low as 6 to 7 blues if they have a lot of fealty, but in general, decks want kind of like 9 to 10 blue range. And yeah, if those are 3 blocks, that's great. And then the last one is D-Reacts. I think that like the D-Reacts are honestly power cards. Most of them are effectively 0 for 4s or conditional 0 for 4s, sometimes even 0 for 5s. And defense reactions against attack reactions is really strong. So you should basically play every D-React that you have in your pool that's legal in whatever deck you register. And if one hero has two, like one, like let's say one hero has like 1 D-React and the other has like 3 D-Reacts and the rest of the cards look kind of close, I would go with the one with more D-Reacts. So D-Reacts are like, they're like on the level of the 0 for 4 go again. So the premium cards. I think the D-Reacts are just like super good. They might be some of the best commons. So specifically the marking ones are very good.
Yeah, okay, that makes sense. I guess a question about the format would be like, how often were people marked? Like, I understand like Arachne marks a bunch, but like, what about Fang and Sindra? Like, do they end up marking like a good amount? And how easy was it to get like the 3 fealty that these heroes were looking to get?
It depends. So yeah, ideally Arachne is marking you like most of the time. Fang, it depends. Fang can mark you quite a bit. Fang can either kind of be like lots of draconic attack reactions, or can play like some draconic attack reactions and then some mark to give fealty, and the fealty lets you like use generic attack reactions and make them draconic. And the generics are kind of like one more efficient, like you get 0 for 3s instead of 0 for 2s, so that fealty is kind of like directly worth one value. So that's like one way to play Fang, or you can just go turbo fealty to get to the 3 fealty tokens. It really depends on your deck and how much it can mark. But some Fang decks will mark you constantly, and some Fang decks will just like mark you a little bit here and there. And I've definitely seen decks that like get to that 3 fealty pretty reliably, and I've also seen decks that just kind of like use their fealties as they get them when it's convenient to do so, and kind of stick around like 0 to 1, maybe sometimes 2 fealty tokens, and they just kind of fluctuate in that range, and they're not really trying to get Fang's hero ability online. So I think they both are possible. Um, I would expect to be marked a decent amount against Fang, though.
Okay, that's fair. Well, what about Sindra? Like, does Sindra care about mark at all?
Sort of. So fealty still usually translates to 1 in Sindra, because you can make a non-draconic attack into a draconic one, which means you can retrieve your dagger for 1 less resource. So it kind of like translates loosely into a resource. And then there's some of those draconic payoffs, like the ones that I talked about, the 1 for 7s, if they're draconic. Those types of cards are really, really good. So you can usually get somewhere in the realm of like 1 to 2 value out of a fealty token. The biggest difference for Sindra is like, I think you have a bit fewer ways to mark, and you're less willing to play. I think that like Fang and Arachne are willing to be a little bit below rate to mark because marking is so good in them. Like you can play Public Bounty Red, I think is actually just a good card in them. This is a generic, and it is a 1 for +3 to your next attack, and you just mark your opponent unconditionally. I think this card is just like straight up good in Fang and Arachne, but in Sindra, you don't really want to be playing a 1 for 3 just to mark them. You kind of want to like be on rate and like incidentally mark them. Like Syndra's a lot more interested in like Mark with Magma is one of my favorite cards in Sindra. This is a 1 for 4 block 3 draconic attack action. It says if you control 2 or more draconic chain links, this gets go again, and when this hits a hero, you mark them. So it's like a block 3 leg tap, so long as you have 2 draconic chain links, which is pretty easy because your weapon is a draconic chain link, and then this will be your second one. And then it's just like a on hit mark, and sometimes you get it and you get your 1 value, and sometimes you don't, and like you're just kind of fine with it.
Yeah, your opponent blocked it, right? So that's pretty good too.
Yeah. Or like the D reacts, right? You're like, I'm blocking for 3 with my defense reaction, which is just like on rate and what I want to be doing anyways, and then I just like happen to mark you, and then I can like cash that in for a resource later, is like sort of what Syndra's trying to do, like incidentally mark you here and there. But I would expect to be not marked when you're playing against Syndra most of the time, and even if she does mark you, like you're not going to be marked for long because she has daggers and breakpoints of 4 all over the place. So you're gonna, yeah, she's gonna make it into a fealty almost right away.
Okay, yeah, like getting attacked by 1/4 and like not with the mark is, yeah, in no way you're gonna block that out, right?
Yeah, pretty much. There sometimes are spots where, like, especially if you've seen them sitting on an arsenal for a while and they have a small hand and you're like thinking of using your equipment soon anyways, it might be reasonable to block out their marks if you can, to deny them like one of those 1 for 7s if they don't have a fealty and they've been like sitting on it. But you don't want to like lose a ton of value trying to block out the mark. Honestly, like I think it is easier to, like against Fang, it's better to block out the effects that mark on hit than it is to try and block out the, like once you're marked, trying to block out and deny them the fealty. It can be relevant if they're going to get up to that 3rd fealty token and they could like not have to spend an extra resource on their attack. Like in that situation, yeah, you should probably try and do that. But for the most part, it's more like the mark you're trying to block out than the fealty.
One more question about the mark before we move on would be, was there a way to remove a mark in this set that like doesn't give your opponent the fealty?
No.
So the moment you get marked, like you're gonna be marked until they hit you then.
Yes. Yeah. That's sort of why I say it's like the mark effect is the better one to block out than the fealty, is because like once you're marked, it's like a matter of time before they hit you and get the fealty for the draconic heroes. But if you like the mark on hit effects are a little bit more Like not every card marks on hit, so yeah, you can reasonably block out those cards, but it's very hard once you're marked to stay off of the fealty.
Okay, yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Yeah, lots of defense reaction, lots of attacks for one. Yeah, no way you can block all of it out.
Yeah, it's like even if you block it out this turn, next turn you're gonna get hit. Like you're just gonna take damage eventually. Like I don't know.
Okay, then you wanna move on next and talk about what each hero kind of wants or is looking for?
Yeah, so we'll give a very brief overview. We'll go more into detail on our how to draft episodes, but this should just give you a basic idea for pre-release. So I'll start by saying I think you can play any hero with any pool to some degree. Like you're gonna have 30 playables and you can play that hero. So if there's a hero, like if you're playing like one pre-release and there's a hero you just like want to play because you really like them, you can probably play that hero. It might not be the best hero for your pool, but you can probably play it and like have a somewhat reasonable deck, and I think that's fine. But if you're wanting to evaluate your pool, figure out what's the strongest, I can give you an idea of what to look for to have like a strong version of that deck or like a pretty solid functional version of that deck. So let's start with Fang, probably the easiest to play and come together. The big thing you're looking for at the baseline is draconic attack reactions or instants also satisfy this because your Obsidian Fire Veins want you to play something on that chain link. So either reactions or instants work. And ideally, you want 6 to 8 of these that work on the first chain link. The ones that are kind of like more on rate are better. So the 0 for 2s are good, the 1 for 3s are good. The ones that give like your draconic attacks +1 for the turn are less good, but still okay. The instant that gives like your next draconic attack +3 is actually incredible. That's just like a 0 for 3 that also punishes them if they overblock, so that card's really good. But yeah, 6 to 8 draconic attack reactions and or instants. Um, Zero costs are premium, but you need to be able to spend a whole blue. So zero costs are kind of like the best ones because they're easiest to combine. Once Fang's online, you can like attack with your dagger for 3, react, it goes up to 4, swing another dagger for 1, and you have like a 1 card 5, which is really obviously really good. Um, but you do want to be finding ways to spend that one resource somewhere, either with 1 cost reacts or attack actions or the warrior like frontside pumps, the non-reaction pumps. Because if you just go like dagger for 1, bump it to 4, dagger for 1, bump it to 4, you've done 8 with 2 reactions and a blue pitch. So you've done like a 3 card 8. Or like maybe a 3 card 9 if it's like one of the ones that gets like +3. But like 3 card 9 is not great, right? Like ideally you're finding a way to spend that extra resource to get like your 3 card 10. So yeah, zero costs are good. They're premium. I would ideally want to have like some zero costs in there, and I'd be looking for them, but make sure that your Fang deck has a way to spend a blue. I actually didn't play my Fang pool in the calling because even though I had the attack reactions, I just had no ways to spend blues available to me. Like I just didn't have reasonable 1 cost cards or not enough of them. And I was just like, this Fang deck's just going to be playing like 3 card 8s all day, and that's not really where you want to be.
Yeah, you're gonna have issues like end of day one, right? If you're even if you can win the first couple of rounds, you're gonna face some powerful decks that just like they're gonna do better stuff than you.
Yeah, exactly. And then in terms of this like 6 to 8 draconic attack reactions, it's worth noting that mark and fealty generation helps supplement this number if you have non-talented reacts because you can make them into like pseudo draconic attack reactions. So if you have a lot of mark, you can get away with lower draconic attack action. Or, sorry, draconic attack reaction count. So yeah, just pay attention to your mark, and you can sort of like treat your mark plus draconics as extra draconic attack reactions. And I think you'll find that you have some draconic attack reactions. I think there's always at least one per pack. So you might not have the good ones, but you're going to have some.
Okay, so you're almost always guaranteed to be able to put some kind of fan deck together.
Yeah. Yeah, I think so. And yeah, the mark and fealty generation is just generally very good. Like any of the red warrior cards that offer mark on hit to your daggers are premium cards that you want to be looking for. This is like Scar Tissue. It's a hybrid react that makes your dagger +3 and on hit mark is really good. There's Hunt the Hunter, which is a 1 for 4 that gives your dagger on hit mark. And there's also a 0 for 3 version of this effect as well. And all of those are just like really, really premium in Fang. either to make your non-draconic attacks into draconics and you go +1 value, or to get Fang's ability online. It kind of depends on the deck. You can turbo fealty, you can use them and stay at 1 to 2 like we talked about, but either way, the fealty tokens and marks are valuable. And Fang basically is just a math pile. You play good math, and you're usually going weapon, draconic reaction, and then you're following it up with either another weapon plus draconic reaction, and you can like add on warrior pumps to that if you have them, or you can end on an attack action is also super reasonable. So if you go like attack with a dagger for 1 for 3 draconic react, put it up to 5, play a draconic 1 for 5. You've done a 3-card 10. You're very happy with that.
3-card 10, good. Make sure your other card's a 3 block, and then the 4-card 13. Perfect.
Exactly. Yeah. And that's basically what Fang's trying to do. And I think that this is why people gravitated to Fang right away, is just you have 0 for 4s, you have good math, you're just like doing Fab Fundy stuff pretty much.
Okay, that sounds amazing. I guess a question I have about Fang was you were talking about the warrior stances not being that great, at least at the rare. These cards were spoiled kind of early, and we talked about it a little bit as well in the pod earlier. But how good or bad were these? Like that's my kind of like question on these cards right now.
I never saw somebody resolve one.
Oh, okay, that's kind of disappointing.
I'm sure like somebody resolved one somewhere. I don't know if it did anything. You know what? The blue one's good because it says block 3.
Yeah, you're right. It's part of your blue block 3 count, right?
Yeah. It's possible that there is like something to be doing here. I don't know. They might be reasonable if you combine it with the Fang spec, or Fang Legendary, Fire and Brimstone. This is the 2-cost 3-block attack reaction, draconic attack reaction, legendary. This costs 1 less to play for each draconic chain link you control, and daggers you control get +1 and may attack an additional time with each of them this turn. I guess if you have, usually the bottleneck with this is like the go again is really hard to get. Like you kind of need like Fang to be online, then have like multiple other draconic attack reactions to like really make this card tick. So like the ceiling on it's high, but it's hard to set up. But I guess maybe if you have this card and you have whatever the go again stance is, agility stance, like maybe that's pretty good. Yeah, I could see that. That seems like the most obvious interaction to me is if you have fire and brimstone in one of these stances, that's probably pretty strong, but otherwise it seems kind of tough.
Okay, yeah, okay, that makes sense. Okay, fair enough. These agilities are the stances aren't, at least they're not sealed playable, right?
Not really. Like maybe there's something I'm missing, but I think all in all, they're if you're playing these, you want to have a plan for them and a reason to be playing them. Don't just like put them in your deck. They're not really good standalone.
Okay, okay.
Even in draft, I saw these cards going super late. So I don't know. Maybe if there's like a sick archetype here, you can like get them late, and that's sweet. But yeah, so
Oh,
far haven't seen it figured out.
that'll be sweet if we can figure out some kind of like stance deck for Fang for draft.
Yeah, it's possible. I mean, they're in the set for a reason. I assume that they're rare for a reason. I don't know. There's probably something there. I do think that many of the decks have multiple archetypes, so it wouldn't surprise me if there's an archetype of Fang that just hasn't been figured out yet.
Then, do you want to move on next to Arachne?
Yeah, we can talk about Arachne. So the main thing you want to look for in Arachne there's actually a number of things you need, and this is maybe why Arachne comes together less in sealed, but I think it sounds like a lot of things, but I think your pools will have a surprising amount of the time. So the first thing is you need a lot of ways to mark. Your hero ability just doesn't do anything without mark, and you probably want like 8+, and ideally some of these are ones that can't be interacted with. So stuff like Reaper's Call that you discard to mark them. That card is fantastic. You absolutely want to have that card in your deck, and I think you want probably minimum 8 of these, and more is better. I don't know if you can have too much mark in Arachne. I don't think so. But yeah, look for those 8+ ways to mark. You want some number of traps because number 6, which is Arachne Trapdoor, is just, I think, consensus like the best Arachne flip. I've heard a lot of players mention this. Just going up a card is really, really good. You just need to make sure that you actually have traps to, like, basically you flip into this, you search your deck, and you can banish a trap card face, or you can banish a card face down, and if it's a trap, you can play it. You need to have traps to search for this effect to be valuable. Something I will mention about Arachne Trapdoor that is relevant is when you flip to Arachne Trapdoor, searching your deck is a may, banishing a card is not. So if you pick up your deck and start searching, and then you go, I don't have any traps, you always have to banish a card.
What?
Yeah.
Oh, that's gross.
Yeah. So and there is like some amount of like you can banish a card and like I guess like bluff a trap, but you are taking a card out of your deck. So just like be aware of that with trapdoor. Is like once you pick up your deck and search, you have to banish a card.
Oh, that's interesting. I didn't realize that. I feel like that's I don't like this templating, but I guess that's what it is.
Yeah. So yeah, you want traps for trapdoor. The gloves are really good. Danger digits. This is the attack reaction flick a dagger gloves. They're super super important because if you flick the token daggers, you can break them to mark them, and you're already breaking your dagger when you flick it. So yeah, you can just basically like mark on hit as a reaction, which is super super strong. And I think that like you kind of want danger digits if you're playing Arachne. Arachne with and without danger digits is just like huge difference in power level. And the reason it's so good is like not only so that you have on demand mark, which can like represent like the +1 and go again, but because the next thing you want is you want the red stealth attacks with on hits. And there's a bunch of these. The on hits are really good. I'd say generally the ones you're looking for are any of like the mark cards are good. So Mark of the Black Widow is if it hits a marked hero, they banish a card from their hand. Mark of the Funnel Web, if it hits a marked hero, they banish a card from their arsenal. And Mark of the Prey is just on hit mark. All of these are really good. And if you get to swing, like your opponent's not marked, you have a one card play, you go Mark of the Black Widow. And then you just kind of get to look at them with your danger digits, and you can go, oh, you blocked for 3, I flick, it goes up to 4. On hit, it gets go again, and you banish a card from your hand.
Hmm.
And that's where like the leapfrog equipment's really powerful, right? And then you can have like other things where like maybe you have that play, but you have a full hand, and then you're starting a whole bunch of reactions on top of it, and that gets really really powerful too. The boots are also really really good. The assassin warrior boots that give go again, and their condition to activate is that you've played or activated an ability during the reaction step. This has like a whole bunch of weird interactions. Obviously you can play a reaction, but anything that you activate or play works towards this. So if you use danger digits to flick your dagger, you can starting point to give go again and kind of go around their blocks is really strong. If you discard a Reaper's Call, you've activated an ability, you can give something go again. So you can like mark them at instant speed with Reaper's Call and give your thing go again with starting point if they've blocked. You can crack a fealty to get go again if you're playing Fang. This came up I think twice in the calling top 8, and Simon Nielsen, who ended up winning, got a lot of equity out of knowing this interaction, and some people weren't aware of this interaction. But basically, anything you can activate lets you use starting point, and this card is also really strong in Arachne.
Okay, that's actually really interesting that you can crack the fealty token to turn on starting point. So you actually really need a way like a fealty becomes the like you pair it with starting point and becomes like a Snapdragon Scalers.
Yeah, and it works on anything is like the notable part. Like it works on any attack action. It works on your dagger, and this like also relevant in Fang, I guess, is if they like block 6 on your dagger, and you have the attack reaction, you can just go, oh, okay, fealty, starting point, another dagger for 1, and you've invested like just like what 1 resource and like your equipment and a fealty token to get 2 cards out of their hand, and then you just get to attack again and hold all your reactions. It's very very powerful. And spoiler, if you don't want spoilers about the calling match, then I guess don't listen for a second. Simon does this. He attacks with a dagger, gets 2 cards, starting point, attacks with another dagger, gets 2 more cards, Draconic attack reacts 0 for 4 for lethal in the finals of the calling, and it's just very powerful. I think there was many people who were aware of this reaction or this interaction, but I don't think his opponent was aware, and there was definitely people that were not aware of this interaction.
Okay, yeah, that's a huge edge to be gained at weak -1 of a format, huh?
Yeah. So yeah, both of those equipments super super good, and they pair well with all of these stealth on hits. The other stealth on hits I want to mention that are really 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 good is the anti-Fang and anti-Sindra ones, the one that give you like contract to hit a marked hero named Fang or hit a marked hero named Sindra, and if you do, you draw a card. Those cards are gross, and if you can mark them multiple times, each time you hit them, you draw a card. And if you flick your dagger while they're marked, you draw a card, and then you can remark them with your dagger. So I've definitely had turns where I draw 3 cards off of this card into like a Fang or a Syndra. So these cards are really, really good, especially if you have the equipment to pair with it.
Interesting, interesting. Oh, this is a question that I had. Just for Arachne, a rules clarification would be like the Arachne's hero text says your attacks with stealth that are attacking a marked hero gets +1, and when this hits, it gets go again. So for whatever reason you hit them with any ability and you decide not to remark them, it loses the +1 and the go again text, right? In the middle of, like, let's say during the reaction step, you fling your weapon and you decide to not mark them for whatever reason, and they don't have a mark anymore.
Yes, yeah, you would. Yeah, you would lose it, and if you mark them during reactions, you gain it.
Okay, so like it doesn't have to be when you attack with it, it gets the thing. It's as long as they're marked, you'll get the thing. So if you mark them in reaction step, it'll also get the +1 and the go again text.
And that's why like the mark of the Black Widow that I was talking about is so strong, with the equipment especially, because you go 0 for 3, you have an onboard way to flick it to 4 and give them marks that the banish from hand is live and +1 and on hit go again. And then if they overblock it, you can like activate the boots, go around them, and play the rest of your turn. And it's why the mark on hit stealth card is like deceptively strong. At red, this is a 0 for 4, that on hit mark. So like you just get these play patterns where you play it as a 0 for 4. If they block 3, you get go again, and then you remark them. And you can just do this. Like I've had turns where I like started with Black Widow, they overblock, I do flick, boots, go again, 0 for 4, they block 3, I hit them for 1, remark, I play another 0 for 4, they get hit for 4, and then I flip at the end of the turn. And it's just like it's super, super crushing. The Arachne marionette turns when they come together are really powerful.
Fair enough, fair enough. Okay, then anything else you want to say about marionette before we move on?
Yeah, the last thing is like you want some reactions, ideally the ones that target stealth. I don't really like the dagger ones. They kind of force you into below rate lines unless they mark. So scar tissue, which we mentioned, the mark on hit dagger react is really good. 1 to 2 stealth reacts is probably sufficient. Your opponent kind of has to play around them. Your Arachne flips give you attack reactions anyways, so like if you don't have that many, don't worry about it. And then the last thing you want is 1 to 2 ways to equip that Graphene Chelicera token. Re-equip, the like retrieve effect that lets you equip a dagger from your graveyard, is also kind of fine. But I think what you'll find is you need to use your dagger and break it to mark them, and you'll kind of be on 1 dagger, but you really want 2 daggers in the end game. And if one of these is the Graphene Chelicera, we kind of talked about like it coming in for 2 and them having to block for 2 because they're at 2 is like a really strong end game that you want to play towards, and just having 1 to 2 ways to equip this is like something I would look for in my sealed pool.
Okay, that makes a lot of sense.
Even if it's like blue or yellow, it doesn't super matter. The pitch of the card doesn't matter. It only comes out rare. But if you have a way, honestly, like the blues and yellows are kind of sweet because you can pitch them for late game.
Yeah, that makes sense. Well, or Rebirth Spinneret is a block 3 as well, right? So like a blue 0 cost block 3 that also just like late game equips the weapon sounds pretty good.
Yeah, it's like super, super premium.
Okay. Then do you want to move on to Sindra last?
Yeah. So the thing that Sindra wants is there's a few things. You want high density of draconic cards, attack actions in particular, because you want chain links to reduce your Sindra hero ability. You don't want to be spending a bunch of resources every turn. Like if you're spending like 1 to 2 resources every turn to re-equip your daggers, your Sindra deck's bad. Like it's that simple. You cannot be paying for these daggers. Like most turns you don't want to be paying. If you're paying 1 sometimes, it's okay. But you don't want to be like sitting there re-equipping your daggers over and over and over again and paying for it. That's just like not a recipe for success.
Is that similar to like, activating Aurora's embodiment like every activating Aurora's hero ability turn after turn and like losing value that way?
I think it's worse. I think it's like actually just worse because like the problem is like your Sindra daggers are like 1 for 1s, which is like a pretty reasonable rate. But if every turn you're paying one, you're basically have like a 2-for-1 dagger, which is like an assassin dagger with no extra text, which is just like not good. And if you're paying 2 resources, it's like a 3-for-1, which is just like completely unplayable. So yeah, you just kind of can't afford to be doing this. It doesn't mean you won't pay. Like sometimes you will just pay. Like that happens. Like I've definitely had spots where like I don't know, I end up on a 2-card hand and my 2-card hand is like swing a dagger for 1, close the chain, draconic 0 for 4, pay 2, get 2 daggers back. And like in the very end game, being on 2 daggers is pretty strong, so it's like kind of okay, but that's like a 2-card 5, right? Like that's not good. That's not what you want to be doing. And that's kind of what happens if you end up paying for these daggers is you have a lot of below rate hands, and doing it once or twice in a game is fine, but if you're doing it repeatedly, there's something off about either your Sindra deck or your sequencing. Um, a good rule of thumb is I think you want probably about half your deck to be draconic attack actions. If you can have more, that's better. Chain enders do count towards this, although you want some with go again. You'll have some with go again. Like all the draconic ninja cards have conditional go again, and even if they're all second chain link stuff, that's actually fine. I think my Syndra deck didn't have a single draconic attack with go again without the second chain link, but it just doesn't really matter because the dagger gives you the first chain link for free so long as you just make sure you're always on a dagger. The big thing is you just can't be paying to retrieve them often. And pay very close attention to your sequencing with Syndra. There's lots of weird stuff with like when to break the chain so that you have enough chain links to like get your daggers back, and you often will be like attacking with a dagger, break the chain, attack with your other dagger, play out all your chain links, and then like pay to retrieve one of them, and kind of like keep looping this play pattern where you like have one dagger retrieve the other ones. And that's kind of like the core gameplay loop of Syndra. But there's just like, yeah, pay very close attention to when to break the chain. There's like lots of small edges there, and I think that sequencing Syndra's turns is just like pretty interesting, but also kind of tricky.
Okay, so I guess it's like a deck where you're if you like make a mistake on like sequencing or like playing an extra card before breaking a chain or something, you could get punished quite hard.
Yeah, it can be very unforgiving, and I have seen people lose games because they just like sequence in a way where they have 0 daggers and then they draw a hand that has no starter and the game's just like actually over. So you have to be very careful about how to sequence. For this reason, Syndra is not that threatening on turn 0 most of the time. Sometimes she is. But I seen like one of the biggest misplays I've seen from Syndra players is like full sending because they're like, I'm the Draconic Ninja, I'm gonna full send, and they like get off Arsenal, they leak like 2 to 3 damage, and they have no daggers going into their next turn, and like that is not a good deal. That is not a good deal for you. You really don't want to have no daggers because you might just end up having to like pitch a whole blue to get those daggers back, and you're just so far behind at that point.
Then I guess a reasonable line, at least following that train of thought, would be like if you pitch a blue dagger, dagger, close the combat chain, and pitch a blue and re-equip past arsenal is like kind of reasonable.
Yeah, it can be very reasonable to start with a dagger and see if you leak one. And I've seen a lot of, I think a lot of times if they just like take the first dagger and your hand's not that good, it's pretty okay to just close the chain, pick up that dagger and arsenal, and you have some filtering. Notably, you can always activate Syndra even if your daggers are in the graveyard. So if you just want to filter, you can also do that.
Oh yeah. Okay, that makes sense. Yeah, if you just wanted to filter your hand without swinging the daggers.
You can do it on your opponent's turn too. Be careful with that, but you can do it on your opponent's turn.
Oh, on turn 0.
Yeah, because it's a once per turn instance. You can activate it on either hero's turn.
Okay, that's actually kind of interesting.
Yeah, something to keep in mind. Yeah, so make sure you have those draconic cards in Syndra. Chain Enders are good as well. And then you want good rate non-draconic cards. Something that's weird is like your head jab and leg taps stat lines that aren't draconic just like kind of aren't good. Like there's like a head jab that marks on hit. I think that card's pretty bad. There's a leg tap that marks on hit. That card's like fine, but it's not one of the best Syndra cards. Um, Yeah, like in most sets, those cards would just be really good, but in this set, they're not. And it's because from your non draconic cards, you have things like 1 for 5s. There's Grow Claws. It's a 1 for 4 that if the last chain link was Draconic, it gets +1. So it's just a 1 for 5 go again. There are 0 for 4 go agains. And that's really what you want out of your Sindra cards. And you also kind of probably really want to have at least 1 for 7. Um, or something similar. I think that you kind of want to have one of these to play towards. I guess if you have like a lot of 1 for 5s and 0 for 4s, you probably also have a good deck. But yeah, either very high density of 1 for 5s and 0 for 4s, or minimum one of these 1 for 7s is kind of what you want. And then I haven't talked about these cards yet, but the on hit mark cards, there's a 0 for 4 and 1 for 5 on hit mark at generic. These cards are good in every hero, and they're good in Sindra. I think you actually want some of these chain enders because without them, you'll struggle to have a good rate.
Mostly in Sindra, right? Or do you think it's important in everyone?
I think these particular rares that mark on hit are just good in everybody,
Hmm.
and some of the generics that have good rate are just like good cards. But yeah, I think Sindra actually like needs them. But between the Draconic cards and these generics, she actually has a lot of access to it. Like all the like for the cycle, the for the realm, for the Drakai, all of those cards are good. 0 for 4, 1 for 5, 2 for 6. If they're marked, you create a fealty. Those cards are really good in Sindra. Those cards are just good. They're good in Fang too.
Does this mean that like I guess like classically if you're playing ninja you're really looking for like I guess looking back at 5 from Uprising you're all like basically looking for any head jab with draconic name or like the 1 for 4 go agains. Does that mean Syndra kind of like wants these cards a little bit less than usual?
Yeah, I think if they're not Draconic, you don't want the head job and leg tap stat lines. And if they are Draconic, they're very good. And then if they're, yeah, the non Draconic ones, they need to have significant upside, like +1 power, for example, is usually the upside you're looking for.
Okay, yeah, that makes sense.
There is a dagger throw sub theme in Syndra. I'm not sure it's very good. So the advantage of throwing a dagger is you can throw the dagger that you swung with, and then you can get like both your daggers back if you have a dagger in your graveyard already, which is good. And because of this, I think Danger Digits, again, the gloves that flick, is really good because it gives you 1 value and then you get like an extra dagger back. So you kind of get like 2 out of them in quotations. Usually you want to do this in the end game so that you can have both your daggers up when your opponent's really low, which is really strong. And you might even be able to go off daggers if you know your deck is very blue heavy, if you can take all of their hand or almost all of their hand because you can get them into that dagger loop that I was talking about. But yeah, you can throw daggers. Throwing daggers is good. You don't want to do below rate things to throw daggers though. So like throw yourself at them is a 1 for 3 where you can flick a dagger. This card is not good. We kind of talked about like 1 for 4s not being good, and this is like a 1 for 4 that yeah lets you get a dagger back, but like I don't think it's really sufficient upside. You can play this card; it's not terrible. The blue one is pretty good. Like if you have to play a blue 2 block, this is one of the better ones because you can just kill them with like at the end of the game, which is really good.
Oh, that's a gross pitch stack. You pitch stack to throw yourself at them and then 1 1 1 1. Oh, gross.
Yeah, I think I generally like the dagger cards at blue. There's also like Poison Blade that makes your daggers have on hit they lose a life, and you can maybe like pitch stack that with throw yourself at them, and then you have these daggers that on hit lose a life, and you can flick them, and I think it can get like pretty out of control. But I think you probably want them at blue. I don't think the reds are like that good. Maybe there's like a very specific deck where when you have the right pieces, you can play the red ones, but I think in general, I'd rather just play good reds and then have this at blue as like a way to close the game. The problem with Poison Blade is like you don't actually have that many on hits, and if you play it early and you go like dagger dagger on hit, you lose a life. They just like I block with my Iron Rod and I get 2 value out of it. Sweet.
Yeah, okay. The dagger thumb theme, maybe a draft archetype, if anything.
Yeah, I think so. I think what I said about it being best at blue is like pretty true. At least that's like my current assessment. Things could change, but I think just like having them in your blue base is good. Building into them too much at red is probably not super great. Maybe if you have like enough flick effects, but even then, I don't know. It's more like an end game finisher than an early game.
Okay, that makes sense. I guess the last thing I wanted to just mention about Sindra, we talked about this earlier in the episode, but how important do you think like having a razor reflex in Sindra?
If you have a razor reflex, I think it's pretty good for closing out games. I don't think you need it though.
Okay, so like you don't think it's like good to have a razor to like, surprise three them somewhere, or do you think it's just like nice to have, but it's just better to be above rate and just keep on doing above rate stuff?
Yeah, I think you just want to be above rate and do above rate stuff as much as possible. I played Syndra a few times this weekend. And I don't think I had Razor in any of them, and it felt fine.
Okay, okay, that makes sense. So I guess this is one of those cards where like it's good in the deck, but it's not it's not like a thing that makes or breaks a deck. Because I remember like having a lightning press in like Tales of Aria sometimes made the Lexi deck like A tier versus like a B or C tier deck.
No, I don't think it's anywhere near that pronounced. You don't really have on hits to push over, and 1 for 3 is not really a good rate. Like Razor really is mostly for leaking damage turn 0 or killing them in the end game, or getting them low enough to get them in the dagger lock. But I think that you don't. Yeah, the card's fine. I think Syndra's biggest strength is just all the above rate stuff. The 1 for 5s, the 0 for 4s with Go Again, and then the 1 for 7s. So you can just kind of play like good math, like a lot of 3 card 10 kind of stuff, 3 card 11s, and then have like a big like one big pop off turn, and that's like kind of enough to win with Syndra, in my opinion.
Yeah, the casual 3 card 11. Yeah, nice, nice.
Yeah, I mean like the set's really powerful, so it's like it's good, but it's like less good than it sounds. I'll say that there is another Syndra archetype that we actually saw on stream from Simon in I think it's the last round of Swiss. I don't think you can build this in sealed, but it looks like you can build it in draft because you drafted it. And this is basically just like a red line Syndra that plays all the 0 cost draconic cards and a bunch of head jabs. And you can even play the is it like Blessing of Vincerakai? It's a doesn't have go again non-attack action. It gives at the start of your turn it breaks. It gives your first attack +3 and it's draconic. You can play that card as like a chain ender to have a big turn and guarantee a draconic starter. This deck looks pretty sweet. It's a deck that like I had thought about and was like, I think that this is possible, and then Simon showed it off on stream, so I guess it was possible. So like that is another archetype, but think it is probably more of a draft archetype than a sealed one. If your sealed pool supports it, you could try it. But yeah, I think outside of this archetype, you really don't want cards like Grow Wings, which is just like a non-draconic head jab. Those cards are just like not very good. But if you're in this archetype, then head jabs are good.
Yeah, that sounds like the red line fight X. People underestimate head jab, head jab, head jab, head jab. That's a reasonable turn.
Yeah, it just kind of turns out like when your Sindra deck doesn't click and you don't have the cards, you wind up doing these like 2 card 5s, 3 card 8s, and that's not great. And sometimes if you just go 3 3 3, that's like actually just better.
Yeah, 3 3 3 4, 3 3 3 4. Aw, unbeatable.
Yeah, it's like actually just very strong and very. I think the consistency is the biggest thing. Like it doesn't have the ceiling, but it's just like so consistent. And if your opponent stumbles, you just completely take advantage of that.
That's fair. That's fair. Okay. Is there anything else about Syndra you want to say before we close out the episode?
Just make sure you have a plan going into your turn about how you're going to sequence your turn. There was definitely like towards the end of the day where I was like tired and was like, surely I can just start with a kunai. And then I was like going and I'm like, oh, my resources don't work. Why did I swing this kunai? Oh no. And it's like super bad. So just be careful. I think it's very easy to like autopilot yourself into a bad spot. So just make sure you've planned your whole turn. The resources work. Your draconic chain links to get your dagger back works. Yeah. If you're going off your daggers, you can do that. I think it's right to do it. There's some very pivotal spots to do it, but be careful when you go off your daggers. It is a big decision to go off your daggers.
Okay. Okay. That sounds like a good warning for at least the Syndra players, because they can't really go back once you swing with the with the weapon, right? Because it gets destroyed.
Yeah, yeah. You can just like wind up with a completely non-functional hand. So yeah, just be very careful. But yeah, I think Syndra's a lot of fun. I think she's very good if you get the hang of her. So yeah, that's kind of like I think what I wanted to talk about today in terms of the pre-release primer, give you an idea of what to look for Sindra, Arachne, and Fang. Again, I think they're all playable. I think that you can expect Arachne and Sindra to have a little bit more of a learning curve, and I think Fang is like kind of just like easier to play out of the box. He's just the most straightforward to sequence. And if you notice, like when we talked about like what the heroes want, Sindra and Arachne want more things, whereas what Fang wants is like very simple. He just like wants a good curve and draconic attack reactions, and then like you know that's it. Just like good raw value, and as long as he has raw rate, which is easy to do because the set has a bunch of very premium reds, you're good.
Okay, yeah, that sounds great. Do you want to close us off as well, Yuki?
Yeah, so that's going to wrap us up. Hopefully, this helps you out for your pre release and maybe even calling Memphis if you're planning to go to that and play sealed. So, thank you all for listening. Hope you enjoy exploring the hunted. And if you figure out any draft archetypes or sealed archetypes that we didn't talk about, we would love to hear about them. So, you can let us know either in the Patreon Discord, in the comments, or by contacting us on social media. So Jay is at UATJ over on Twitter. I'm at Yuki Bender. We also have an email on the Bauble at gmail.com, and our Patreon information is available at patreon.com/onthebauble. Thank you all for listening. We'll see you all next week. Good luck at pre-release.
Okay. Can I talk about one card in the set that's for the what's it called? What is this thing called? The sign off?
Yeah.
Isn't Schism of Chaos, the fabled in the set, kind of messed up?
It's pretty funny.
Isn't this card really good?
It might be.
It feels like this is a staple in Arachne, right? Like you just need it in every Arachne deck.
I'm not sure. I haven't seen it in play, but it does strike me as potentially a pretty playable.
Because like, if your opponent has an arsenal, you pitch this card. It's just a +1.
Yeah.
And then if your opponent doesn't have an arsenal and you pitch this card and you command and conquer or leave no witness them, you just like put them in this like awful spot.
Yeah, like if you're both on, you like block down and you have no arsenal, or you have like a CNC or an arsenal in this card, and they have no arsenal, and you just go pitch CNC. You're just like CNC draw a card, kind of.
Yeah, or like imagine your hand is just like CNC no arsenal in this card. You just like
Exactly.
yeah, you just pitch a Schism, or like you just go pitch Schism, attack with like a dagger, tunic, command and conquer. We both get a random arsenal. Like that just sounds like an awful spot for your opponent.
Yeah, it's definitely an interesting effect. I think the question will be like, how good is this card when you have it on like your other turns?
It's a blue. Like how bad could it be? I guess
Well,
the worst case scenario is like you give them an arsenal and you don't get an arsenal.
Yeah, or if you have to like end up swinging a dagger that you don't want to swing, and you like give them an arsenal, and then your arsenal's kind of bad. It's like, I can imagine spots where this card is not great, but I can also imagine spots where this card is really good. The thing that I thought of when I read this card was like, if you play this against an MST hero and they put a chi in their arsenal, it's pretty funny.
Oh yeah, with the shuffle and it's random too. Holy! If you get to snipe a chi into their arsenal, like an actual chi.
Yeah, I mean, like, it's sort of weird because like you might destroy their arsenal and save them from their bricked arsenal, but like I don't know. That's like what came to mind. It's interesting. How good is this in a real game? I have no idea, but it does sound pretty funny.
Wait, that kind of reminds me. Like, I guess there are decks that like kind of get bricked really hard if they put like a bad card into their arsenal.
Yeah, like against Guardian, you like just like slam some random blue Guardian card in their arsenal, and you're
Yeah, like a deliberate. Like you slam a deliberate in their arsenal, and they just look at it and they go, "Huh, I don't really want to pitch 6 for this card," and you just like ignore their arsenal for the rest of the game.
Yeah.
I think Schism of Chaos is a messed up card. I don't know how they even like thought this was okay at Fabled.
Yeah. I haven't played with the cards. So I'm going to reserve judgment, but it does seem.
It has the typical, this is a symmetrical effect, so this has to be okay, right? Question mark. Like, and then people play with
Yeah.
it, and you're like, this is not symmetrical ever, and you're just like, The downside of like the bad cases of this is like completely negated by like the upsides of this card being like just beyond insane. Because like when you play this card, you're building your deck to like not have a bad arsenal card, right? And then so like you shouldn't really
Yeah.
have like a bad arsenal. Like honestly, assassin doesn't really have that bad of an arsenal, right? Like mostly if you're playing Arachne Marionette.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Like,
Yeah.
if it's new, it's a little bit different. You can put your own cheese or something, but like you don't have cheese in this deck. Like, sounds
Yeah, your
insane.
only bad arsenal is this card, but
You
you're
can't.
pitching it, so you can't do
Yeah,
that.
you can't hit it. You can't hit it.
Oh, in the mirror, you slam your opponent's Schism of Chaos into their arsenal.
That would be gross. Oh man, yeah. I'm just like in this point of like, this is a card where like if I ever wanted to build Arachne, I need to pick one up no matter what, because like even if it's not like immediately good, it's gonna be good somewhere,
Yeah, that's probably true.
right?
It's
Like,
sort of interesting that like you get to a late enough endgame versus an MST hero, your likelihood to put a Chi in their arsenal is just like at some point it's just 100%. But I mean, I guess at that point it doesn't matter. But still, like
against Zen, you just like Schism and you get their chi into their arsenal, and you just never arsenal disrupt them ever again.
does sound pretty good.
Yeah, only hand disruption. Oh, that sounds like death sentence for Zen.
Yeah, that does sound pretty sweet.
Okay,
Okay.
yeah, that's all I wanted to say. I think Schism is a messed up card, and the more I think about it, the better this card gets.
Yeah, I agree. I think this card seems quite playable. That was sort of my take reading this card too. I was like, isn't this just quite good? And we'll have to see it in play, but I suspect that this card is quite good.
Yeah, yeah. I think it's gonna take like a little bit of practice with this card, but like, oh, when it's good, it's gonna be insane.
Yeah. It kind of reminds me of like Codex of Inertia, and I really liked Codex of Inertia. So
Yeah, yeah. It is awkward with Codex of Frailties though.
yeah,
Yeah, they
that's
don't they don't work well together.
no.
But I think that's like the only anti combo that I can think of. So I don't know. I'm pretty excited for this card, and I am. If I'm gonna play Arachne, I will be playing this card. At least like my first like 10 builds is gonna have this card in it.
That makes a lot of sense.
Okay, yeah, that's all I wanted to say.
All right. Have a good night, everyone.
Hey, good night.